Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and today we get the pleasure of talking with Sissel Anderson about the quick judgments we make of ourselves and, well, unfortunately others. Good morning, Sissel.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
You know, good until I read the topic, and I was like, oh, I need to really focus on this because I'm guilty.
Oh, you know what? I was just thinking about you, and I was like, judging you and thinking this is a subject I think that we need to chat about on the radio for sure. It's been on my mind a little bit for a couple of different reasons. Usually a couple of things have affected why I choose a different topic. Of course, first and foremost, it's something that I know that I struggle with myself. And I think most people listening probably do. If you do not, well, congratulations, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
But, when we think of the word judgment, there's a lot of things that come along with that. You can think about like the final judgment. And then what I'm talking about particularly today are the judgments that we make often in our minds. Sometimes we'll say them out loud. That's really bad too. When we see someone doing something we don't like or is not good, and we instantly put a judgment on them. And we as humans are really bad about righteously judging, properly judging. It's very popular. It has been very popular, I think, for the last bit of time to, pull out Bible verses and be like, we can't judge. We don't judge. Don't judge me. Which, yes and no, because the Bible, there's a verse, particularly the one I think people refer to is in Matthew 7, where it's like, judge not, that you not be judged. Everyone's like, well, that's pretty clear. Judge not. I'm not going to do anything. It's a little bit deeper than that. I think what Jesus is getting here, because this is again from the Gospels, is that with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. And then he spends a lot of time focusing on, okay, make sure that you're looking at what's going on in your own life. Make sure you're living righteously, before you're dishing out that judgment. But that being said, I think one thing that came to my attention when I was with a women's group recently, we were talking about it because we were talking about the Lord's Prayer, about, forgiving others. And I never even thought about it this way, but our leader said something that I was like, oh man, that makes a lot of sense, is that not only it's not that we shouldn't judge others, it's that we actually can't. And I mean that in the sense that we never, when I say this is because we, again, are really bad about separating what we're judging, and we tend to put it on the whole person, like the person's what their actions are, who they are. And it's because we will never know the full data of what the person behind that person's action. And so we cannot properly judge because we don't know that information. And so it's not just that's God's job and we shouldn't be doing it. It's more like we just can't. That's not something we can do. Now, that is not to say, because I know a lot of people are thinking like, well, there's definitely there's right and wrong. We can't say there's not right and wrong. No, absolutely there's right and wrong. And there are times where people will do things where you're just going to have to be like, hey, we can't be doing that. That's not something, we as Catholics believe. But it's very different than putting it on the person entirely, just being like, you are wrong. You are a bad person. You're doing this. But it's a really difficult balance, and I think we struggle with it. I don't know about you personally, Keith, but I know I do.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's one of those things where I used to be of the mind where I don't judge people, I judge their actions, which, come to think of it, like how it's so difficult to separate like the person from their actions that you kind of muddle it, and then you actually end up just judging the person because of their actions. I don't know how to do it properly. So it's almost like you said, it's best to not judge the person and just see how you could do better, or I don't know. It's tough.
It's really, really difficult. In the Gospel of John, Jesus also says, do not judge by appearances, but judge by right judgment, which we're like, that's great. That's really hard for us. That is great. And it's very hard, but sometimes you almost have to just acknowledge that there's something that someone's doing. Because first off, there's not always going to be our it's not always our job specifically to be the person to talk to that person. Sometimes it
Right.
is. Sometimes God is calling us to talk to someone if it's something serious that needs to be, addressed. Especially if it's like you're at your church, you're volunteering at your church, and you see another volunteer who just isn't aware of maybe some church teaching and is saying something, you're like, hey, just so you know, that's actually not correct. We know that there are a lot of people who are poorly catechized, and have, misinformation about what we believe as Catholics. And sometimes you have to be that person to step in. But again, that's not let me just judge, oh man, because that, I bet, what? I bet their prayer life is really bad. I bet they're not really even practicing, like you can do all sorts of really horrible, harsh judgments. The other reason why I was thinking about this topic in particular is recently my friends and I rewatched the movie 12 Angry Men. Have you ever seen that one?
A long time ago, yeah.
A long time ago. It's a great movie. I love it a lot. First off, it's really simple in its premise and its filming. They mostly film it in one room, which is a jury room. So if you're not familiar, 12 Angry Men, it's talking about 12 men on a jury for a murder trial. And it seems like at the beginning that it's a pretty cut and chase, murder trial. This kid who's kind of had a troubled life killed his father. Or that's what, they're having to decide if he did or didn't. And pretty much every man that walks in there is ready at the get-go. They do an initial vote. And 11 out of 12 go, yeah, he's guilty. And then one man goes, hey, I am not really confident in passing out that judgment immediately. I want to give this guy a little, because we're talking about in the era too that this was going to be straight to a death penalty. And so it was a pretty serious thing. And he seems to be the only one who's taking it really seriously, because all those men in that room heard the very basic outline of what this kid's life was like, kind of a snapshot. And they made that judgment that this kid, it just made sense that he killed his father. And it's really beautiful, because you just see this one man who's played by Henry Fonda. We're talking a lot about Henry Fonda these days. He was in my movie last week, and I like him a lot. He's a great actor. He is the sole man for a while standing up for this kid, and he keeps saying, he goes, I don't know if this kid killed his father or not, but I have enough reasonable doubt that I don't want to make this judgment and send him off to die without really, looking at it seriously. And then, of course, throughout the, plotline, they discover some holes maybe in the prosecuting story and to add more reasonable doubt. But I just think it's so beautiful, because you're kind of like, oh, he's like standing up kind of like Jesus, who's like advocating for us sometimes when we know we're doing wrong. So if you want to do something this week, any homework, watch 12 Angry Men. It's a fantastic film. And it can kind of teach us a little something about those harsh judgments, because as the movie goes on, each person you kind of see what their tendency on judgment is, and that they just naturally do it and don't even think about it.
Yeah. I really like what St. Basil the Great has said. I found a quote. He says, if you see your neighbor in sin, don't look only at this, but also think about what he has done or does that is good. And infrequently trying this in general, while not partially judging, you will find that he is better than you.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh no, yeah, that's so true though. I love that, because again, we're really bad. Honestly, my mom was someone who, she would admit that she had a bit of a problem sometimes being very harsh and like immediately judging someone, but then she would always walk it back and be like, okay, what is going on in this person's life? What is happening that might be, causing this, and how can I then offer that grace, to be able just to, instead of like, they're doing this wrong, and to how can I help in this circumstance, and how, and also the big thing is, honestly, at the end of the day, it's like, how would we want to be treated in this? Because we all know, hopefully we have a good awareness of our own struggles and our own sins. At least, even if we're struggling, obviously there's struggles, they're ongoing struggles. We're practicing Catholics, not perfect Catholics. But hopefully we have an awareness of what we're struggling in. And if we think about, if we were only being judged just merely on that, if we were left in the human world, if the final judgment was just by, humans, we would be in a heck of a lot of trouble all the time. Whereas God looks at all aspects, of our lives. Of course, obviously our actions are a huge part of that, but, God has the full picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of reminds me of, I was just thinking about my time in jury duty a few years ago. I won't go into the specifics, but it was very interesting, because this person that I was, as a jury duty, as someone that was in the, I don't know, what do you call it? The audience? Not the audience, but I was. What's
I have no idea. Actually,
what are the terminology is? I need another cup of coffee. But the person that was what we were going to be, you know, putting our vote in, so to speak, was already been charged guilty and was already serving their punishment, their judgment. And they were wanting like these other, they were wanting to add more to it, and it was just kind of a little over the top. And all of us were like, "Well, he's already doing the serving of like what are we doing here?" And so it's just very interesting. Like even when we're fulfilling our civil duty, it's important to keep in mind, judgment in general. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I have not been able to, not served on a jury duty as of yet, but I think it would be a very interesting experience, certainly, especially coming from a very Catholic perspective. But yeah, it just kind of goes to show how complicated human hearts are, and we can't see any sort of we can't see inside the human heart. So that's why we kind of leave the judgment of the person to Jesus. We try to hold each other accountable as we live out the faith journey, because that is certainly a big portion of it. But remembering first and foremost what's going on in our own life. So as a practical thing for this week, something I tried to do, struggle with still, again, I'm right there with everybody, but when you have that thought about somebody, you see someone, they're doing something, and you're like, "Oh, that's not right," and you immediately start having those negative thoughts, is that make yourself stop for a second and say 3 great things about that person, and about who they are as a person, and kind of make sure that you're distinguishing, I don't like the action or the thing that they said from but I still, I love this person because they're a daughter of God.
I think today it's we've gotten to the point where we really take what someone said really personally. Now I can't be with the person because they believe this, they believe that. It's like, okay, we can have disagreements and still love and have that dignity towards the person. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you there, Sissel. Always giving us some good feedback to start our mornings. We can catch you as producer for Back to the Father Friday afternoons on YouTube, 1 p.m. Central. Also the host of Young and Present in Dallas. But that is the end of our first hour. Some might be dropping their kids off at school. Some might be just getting their 3rd or 4th cup of coffee. I wish I could be that person right now. But just know that we have a whole another hour of Morning Joy coming up here shortly. Tomorrow on this time, it would be Alan Smith on Bishop Sheen Today talking about St. Therese of Lisieux. So make sure to tune in for tomorrow. But otherwise, we'll see you right after this break here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.